Good afternoon and welcome to the Pleasure for Health podcast. My name is Ailsa Kepi and I am a somatic sex educator, and I am very excited to be here with you today to talk about the existential meaning of our parts. And by that, I mean our sexual parts, particularly, although I have to say that being a body worker for many, many years, I also realized that the body itself has a way of talking to us. And I never particularly put it together that our private parts, our genitals, also talk to us in the same way. And I know that sounds silly now that I never put that together, but I was always dealing with, oh, you have a sore shoulder. This might mean that you're giving too much because we give with our arms, or you have a sore pelvis or hip, maybe you have trouble moving forward in life. I've always related those types of things to the body, but I have never really looked at how that might relate to our genitals. So I am very excited today to be here with you to talk a little bit about this. And I must say that this came up because of reading a book called The Existential Life of the Penis, which is a great book, I have to say. And if you do get a chance or you're inspired, it was written by a psychologist, and the name actually is escaping me right now, but you could definitely look up the title. He was a psychologist, worked with many different men, and talking about sexual dysfunctions, about erectile dysfunctions, and about things that came up with issues around sexuality and sexual functioning. And he was working with this with many different men and realizing that the typical way that we deal with sexual dysfunction is just to try to regain function. And although that might sound like it makes sense, it's not actually dealing with potentially the deeper meaning of why we're having the dysfunction in the first place. Which, as a body worker, we can treat your shoulder and fix your shoulder so that you don't have a rotator cuff sprain anymore. But why you got that injury and why to that part of the body? Was it postural? Was it strain? Was it emotional? Was it all of the above? We haven't really touched on that. So I think it's important to think about our genitals in the same way as the rest of our body. We are, after all connected. And so I noticed that, people that are women or female assigned people have often looked at the deeper meaning of their womb, their uterus, their yoni, their vulva, their vagina. They've looked at all of that a little bit more deeply, quite often in regards to women's circles, in regards to, letting go of past trauma, potentially, doing some kind of ritual cleansing between partners. Women have tended to look at that part of their body and dealt with what is going on at a deeper level, and how am I honoring my yoni, or how am I honoring my uterus or my feminine parts. Or also I've worked with women in regards to having a hysterectomy, or even a radical hysterectomy where you're losing the cervix as well. How do we relate to our body with or without the actual physical parts? Do we have energetic, many women report having a feeling of having an energetic uterus, or, ovaries and things that are still present for them in their experience of their body and in their femininity, if that's what they relate to, in a way that I think has been more held. There's been more spaces held for, women and women's body parts than there's ever been for men and the penis. We kind of just roll our eyes when men come in with erectile issues. Mostly men are just like, well, I just want it to work. I want it to be reliable. And this is what has been brought to my attention, is that although that some of the work with, let's say, how you work with the penis, different types of stimulation, are all the nerves working properly? Is there shame coming up, or is there something in the particular relationship that's coming up? Is there something there? And all of those are important aspects. But thinking about the penis or the vulva, actually, but thinking of our genitals as a sign of our life force, which it absolutely is. I mean, having sex is the procreative act of being human. And so having, it doesn't really make you have to stretch that far to understand that the penis or the vagina or the vulva might represent, in our body's way of speaking, something to do with this existential kind of fear of death or fear of mortality, fear of loss. There may be many things coming up in regards to this part of our body. And, as I mentioned, women have started to begin looking at this. But I think for people with penises as well, this is an interesting concept. If you, let's say, start off in a relationship, you're really happy, you're excited, you're dating, everything's going well in the bedroom, and then you get married and all of a sudden things are not so easy, or you're losing your erections or things like that. It's interesting to notice that we have in the past, I think, tended to think, oh, well, you're not interested in your partner, or sex isn't the same when you're married, and we just kind of laugh it off. But it's really could be deeper than that. There could be an absolute fear of being intimate, but that could come from a deeper level. For example, one of the stories I read about in this book was someone, I'm probably going to mix up a couple of them, but the gist of it was that this particular man, as a child, his mother had had depression and had been in and out of hospital multiple times while he was very young. And so his experience, nobody had ever explained to him where his mom was going. They just kind of shipped him off to the grandparents or whatever. And so he had this idea that at any moment, the woman that he most cared about, his mother, could just disappear. And so later, that kind of sat with him for many years, until he got in a serious relationship and was with a woman that he felt really attracted to, he was very happy with, they had a good life together, and all of a sudden he was having issues with erections and maintaining that in their sex life. And what this psychologist sort of figured out with him during therapy was that he was replaying that deep-seated fear of the woman in his life disappearing at any moment without explanation, and the fear of that was coming out in his penis, in the actions of his penis, which I think is, it makes kind of sense, right? We have, like I said, many aspects of pain and dysfunction in our body come about not just from physical accidents or physical sprains or strains, but actual emotional attachments to things, and unprocessed emotions lead to lots of dis-ease. So it makes sense that this connection, once you start feeling really safe and potentially vulnerable as well to this intimate relationship, that you might end up manifesting this kind of dysfunction in your sexual organs. Now, the other time this might come up, this kind of existential, worried about death or worried about abandonment kind of thing might come up, is the phenomenon of people to engage in more risky sex or more sex when there's fear of imminent death. And I think that we've all kind of watched movies about this. We've all maybe, even experienced it a little bit. Like, what the hell? Everything's going to shit in a handbag. Maybe, I should just fuck, And so maybe there is something about that fear of imminent death that you want to have one last go at making life in a way, in a symbolic sense. Obviously, not every sexual act results in making new life, but in our psyche, the act of sex represents procreation, represents continued life. And so if we have some sort of fear about dying, fear about death, a fear of mortality, a fear of getting old, a fear of abandonment, like we're going to be alone, all of these things might come up in our body in such a way around our genitals. So I just thought this was a super interesting topic to think about and to bring to my practice, as far as not just working on the mechanics of being better in the bedroom, or the mechanics of sex, or the mechanics of how you masturbate, or the mechanics of how all the parts work, or even the mechanics of how your body becomes aroused. And there's many things that we work with people as sex educators on. But this idea that there's a depth to it, that there could be a deeper meaning behind some of these dysfunctions, is interesting to me, and is something that I personally have attachment to. I think because I've always considered myself quite a deep person, I like to get to the kind of crux of things. So I think it's something to consider, that if you know, or if you are experiencing whether it's pain with sex, or erectile dysfunctions, or vulvodynia, all of these things could be traced to deeper deeper feelings of shame, deeper feelings of crisis, a deeper feeling of wanting to feel more alive. Many people realize that as they get in a relationship, and the relationship itself kind of hardens up, or it doesn't really keep fulfilling them in the same way of excitement and life force, that they begin looking outside that relationship for other sexual partners or experiences that might bring back the life in them. And I think this is an important thing to deal with. I mean, if that polyamory kind of vision works for you and your partner, and you're able to do that, that's great. But if you are really a monogamous person, you love your partner, you don't want to hurt them, you're not trying to go behind their back, you're not wanting to open your relationship up, it does help to actually look at, well, what am I doing in my life that might be something fulfilling to me as life force? How am I expanding myself as a human being? Or am I just stuck in a rut here? And perhaps my genitals, perhaps my sexual experiences are the only outlet I have for being creative. And so many times, finding another outlet for creativity, finding a way to bring the fear of intimacy to your current partner, and to be talking about that, working with it, potentially can, end these issues in a way that is actually dealing with the core of the problem. So I was just very excited to bring that to you as an idea. I know this is just kind of an intro idea. If you're inspired by this as well, please do reach out to me on my website, pleasureforhealth.com. There are some online courses I have there that are do at your own pace. I have a pleasure mastery for men or women, separate courses. I have one on boundaries, one on taking responsibility for your life, which I feel actually has a lot to do with pleasure, and with bringing our whole self to not only our own life, but to our partners, and in the way that we interact in relationship. So if that interests you, or reach out to me, I'd happy to work with you privately, one-on-one, or looking at some sort of group work along these lines. Sign up for my blog. I send out information about things that occur to me that are interesting, which is something along the lines of today's talk. As I mentioned, this was coming from a book I recently read called The Existential Life of the Penis. If you're interested, please do check that book out. It was really helpful to look at a new way of dealing with erection and erectile problems in a sense with a population, i.e. men, that haven't normally been listened to in that way. So I hope that you'll take some initiative and maybe read that as well. So it's been a pleasure to be with you today, and do check out my other episodes, and I will be super excited to come back and talk about the next topic that I come up with to talk about, hopefully in a week or two. And I will let you all go and have a wonderful day.